Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a few people ask me in the last day or so, they're like, hey Jason, OmarIsuf did a video talking about muscle memory and anabolic steroids. Could you address that? Is there any truth to it? Now I peeked over at his channel and saw that he did in fact make such a video, but I saw a bunch of photos of Kevin Lebrone. I really don't want to get into a big debate of pro bodybuilding because what they do isn't applicable to anyone else in the world. Like no one else is going to use pro bodybuilder stacks and then come off. That would be just insane. So I didn't really watch his video, but I probably get the gist of where he's going with it. So instead of seeing what he had to say, let me just address the topic scientifically, anecdotally, whatever. We have studies out there to where we have taken power lifters who admitted to previously having used anabolic steroids for a year or longer. So long-term use, not one little blast. A bunch of guys say things like, hey, can I go do a blast of gear and or a cycle, whatever kids are calling it these days, and get to my drug-free limit and then come off and keep all of it. No, when you do just one or two cycles, you're going to lose a lot of it. You're not going to keep it. However, when we start talking about long-term use, we found that 3 years after all of them had come off, that's what they were looking for guys who had been clean for at least 3 years, who had used long-term, could they find permanent changes in their body? The answer is yes. When they went and studied this group of guys, what they found is that things like their traps and their quads, when they did muscle biopsies, they had not only more muscle mass than the average person, because they found guys who also hadn't been lifting. They had more muscle mass than they should have had in those areas, but more importantly, they found structural changes that were permanent. They found that in their traps and quads, the muscles that they biopsied, they had an unusually high number of muscle cell nuclei, meaning that the long-term anabolic use had permanently, or at least semi-permanently, 3 years later or longer, increase the number of nuclei in their muscle cells. They had more than people are supposed to have who haven't used any drugs. Well, from a muscle memory perspective, what would that mean? That would mean that more nuclei means usually more faster satellite cell proliferation. It means they're going to grow faster if they start training those muscles again. They're going to see more muscle growth there. And since that's a permanent change in the nuclei there, that could basically mean that they could go beyond their natural limits for those muscles. So the idea that long-term anabolic use could cause someone to be able to go back and train again later and gain more muscle than their frame would naturally hold. Well, if those if the cell nuclei continued to stay high like that indefinitely or for however many years, then yeah, in theory, they could come back and hold more size than someone who's drug-free by continuing to train or coming back and training again. They would probably regain muscle faster, and they would probably be able to get bigger than someone who is natural. So basically the idea is once you're enhanced, you're permanently enhanced. Meaning if you use, at least the data we have, long-term steroid use does seem to make permanent changes in individuals in their muscle cell at the structural level that seems to be somewhat permanent. So yeah, they could get bigger than someone who's drug-free even 3 years later, 4 years later. There is data out there to support the idea. Is it 100% conclusive? No, but that's pretty strong support for the idea. And I think we've all seen it anecdotally. Guys who use heavy doses of gear, years later when they're natural, all of a sudden they're massive. And I encountered that years ago when I met a guy who competed in natural bodybuilding, and he was really big, and I talked to him. He's like, yeah, I used to use a lot of gear, but I have been off of gear for 5 years. I've been completely clean 5 years. But he was pretty big. Like, he's bigger than I would expect from someone who is natural. I didn't have his stats at the time, but he didn't look natural. But he had admitted to me, yeah, I had used steroids. I'd cycled on and off for about 4 years, and then I came off 5 years ago, and then I decided to go over and compete in natural bodybuilding. Well, again, I've seen the anecdote there firsthand with someone like that. We've got some scientific data to support it. So is the idea reasonable? Is it probably true? Yeah, it seems to be true. It probably is true. So long-term steroid users are going to have muscle memory that will allow them to put on more size than they would have had naturally. That's just the reality of it. So basically the idea there is no being enhanced and then coming off and being natural later. Once you're enhanced, you have an advantage for life, even if you come off. That seems to be the case. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.